will be as follows. Dr. Maung will have his presentation in 30 minutes or so, and then we will open a 30 minutes more or less space for questions from the public. Your participation as a public can be of two types. Both of them must be clear and concise questions, please. They can be in Spanish or in English. Please don't interrupt the doctor presentation. If you have any questions during his presentation, please type them on the chat, and at the end, we can ask him the questions orally if you want to, or I can read them for the doctor. Please keep your microphones disabled, and we will start right now, doctor, if you want to.
Thank you, Consuelo, for your kind introduction and also a generous invitation. It is my true pleasure and honor to speak with you and also all the attendees here. And buenos días. No hablo español, so this is the only thing I can say. So please feel free to type in your questions in the chat window. And I will be happy and sharing a story from my homeland, which is the Chittagong Hill Tracts of Bangladesh. So let's get it going, and I will be answering your question after my presentations. You can see the slide, right?
Yes, we can see.
Great. So happy to be among the among the colleagues of Universidad Tecnología de Pereira, and I teach a course at Harvard University, but also I am a teacher as well as research scientist at New York University. So today, the title of my talk is Whose Truth Matters in Education Research? Perspectives from the Indigenous Peoples of Chittagong Hill Tracts, Bangladesh. So I will start with the video, and then we will proceed.
Outrage expressed in London at reports of an horrific massacre thousands of miles away amongst the tribespeople of the Chittagong Hills in Bangladesh. According to the international organization Survival, in April a village in this remote region became a killing field.
Hundreds of men, women and children were locked in their homes and burnt alive. This attack was led by local security forces and was aided by the military and the Bengali people of the area.
Home to some 12 tribes, mostly Buddhist, the Chittagong Hill Tracts are closed to outsiders. Only the amateur cameraman can give a rare glimpse and share the horror of the people mourning their kin, following what Survival calls the worst human rights atrocity in recent times. Yet another attempt to crush a culture alien to Muslim Bangladesh. This was the village of Logang. Eyewitnesses say on the 10th, Bengali youths tried to rape hill women herding their cows. The women fought them off, injuring a youth who later died. It was rumored that rebels had killed him. Revenge was awesome. The attack lasted at least 3 hours. It's claimed that 1,200 died, mostly women, children, and old people.
So 1,200 died, mostly women, children. And let me fast forward because of time.
I feel that there is a tremendous possibility for bringing about a solution to these problems, and they are within our sight, provided the government has a determined political will to solve it.
But witnesses to the years of suffering and depression of the tribespeople say that a government that doesn't admit the problems exist is hardly likely to solve them. Meanwhile, the pleas come for the world to hear.
this policy of genocide being carried out by the Bangladeshi government must stop now.
So to understand what happened in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, we have to go back to the history and see how these things evolve. So many of you know that India was colonized by the British, the way very similar probably also how Spanish colonized entire Latin America. So during the British occupation or colonization of India, in 1835, they decided to write an education policy. And the responsibility was taken by Thomas Macaulay. And he wrote, I have never found one among them, among the Indians, who could deny that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. So that means that the entire civilization of India and Middle East is not as good enough to be the one shelf in European library. And that gives you an idea how they viewed India. And then say, okay, so we ought to deploy an education policy where English is better known than Sanskrit and Arabic. These are the two languages of India at the time. And that to this end, our effort ought to be directed. So that means that everybody is learning English, but it's not only just English. We must at present do our best to form a class of person, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinion, and in morals, and in intellect. Basically, this is a policy to create a proxy class of Indians who think, act like the British. And what we call it, it is like a coconut. It is a white inside. It is a brown outside. Or for someone like me, it would be called like a banana. They try to make us a banana, meaning that outside, I may look yellow or brown, but inside, white, meaning that thinking like white people or acting like white people. So that brings me to 3 points. Today, I will share 3 points in my presentation. And the first point is oppressed and oppressor. So in 1947, British leaves India, and India got divided into 2 countries. India, and then also the green part, West Pakistan and East Pakistan, is the same country, a far distant of 2 parts of the same country. And what we call it Bangladesh was known as East Pakistan at that time. So when Pakistan was created, there is a language policy to be made. What is the policy of the national language policy? Say Urdu, and only Urdu will be the national language of Pakistan. Well, what is wrong with Urdu? Urdu is very different from Bangla, but also if you look at the map of West Pakistan and East Pakistan, these are different ethnic groups and their languages. And Urdu was spoken only by a small percentage of people. So this is on the West Pakistan side, different color, meaning the different language. And also in the East Pakistan side, different colors, meaning that a variety of languages. So if we look at in 1947, West Pakistan had 34 million people, East Pakistan had 42 million people. Combined, Bangla was spoken by 54% of the people, and Urdu was spoken by only 3.51% of the people. So why the language of the 3.51% should be the national language of the country? This is the justification. Pakistan is a Muslim state, and it must have for its lingua franca, the language of the Muslim nation. This is the justification. On the other hand, people who are on the Bangladesh side, they said Urdu or Hindi instead of Bangla, because Bangla is the majority people spoken, is used in our law courts or universities, that could be tantamount to political slavery. So if you impose Urdu on us, it would be a political slavery. So people came to the street, protested in 1952, and police opened fire, and 5 young men were shot, and they died. And finally, Pakistan recognized Bangla as the second official language. So Urdu is the first official language, Bangla is the second official language. But it already galvanized the movement that people in the West Pakistan do not value us the same or equal. So they decided a movement, and 1971, East Pakistan becomes Bangladesh. Bangla meaning that language, Desh meaning country, Bangladesh meaning country of Bangla-speaking people. And today, those people who died for the language, these 5 young men are called language martyrs of Bangladesh. And every corner of Bangladesh, every village, every city, small school, you will see the monument, and this is called Language Martyr Monument. And they died on 21st February, and that's why 21st February is celebrated as the Mother Language Day. That brings to Chittagong Hill Tracks. This is my home with slash green mountain and very mountainous region of the Chittagong Hill Tracks. So if you see the map, the Chittagong Hill Tracks is on the southeastern corner, and it has border with India and Myanmar. And there are 14 indigenous communities, speak 8 different languages, and land is 25% of the 10%. Most importantly, ethnicity, language, and culture distinct from the Bengali majority. So this is our women of different indigenous groups in their traditional dress. This is a typical indigenous family, husband and wife and children. And also our women work in the field outside a lot, so and very active. And this is Mro people having a Mro dance. This is very unique to these groups of indigenous people. And my group, this is Marma. We have a moon dance in a festival. So life has not been always happy in that part of the world, particularly when Bangladesh became independent, they wrote the constitution. And the constitution says the unity and solidarity of the Bengali nation, which derive its identity from the language and culture. And it shall be the basis of Bengali nationalism. What I want to draw your attention, there is no word indigenous here, no recognition that indigenous people exist, but also it is focus on language and culture of the Bengali people. That means that Bengali nationalism. And then so one of the indigenous leader went to the prime minister at that time, said, we are Bangladeshi, meaning they were a citizen of Bangladesh, but not Bengali. That means that we don't speak Bangla as our first language, and it is not our mother tongue. And the prime minister at that time said, go home, become Bengali. It will be a promotion for you. So the indigenous people started protesting for the recognition of indigenous status, as well as for the language. And in response, government militarized, and they ran a reign of terror. And we know this from international documents where 33% of the armed forces deployed for 1% of the population. And so this is from a few international organizations at that time wrote genocide in the Chitong Hill Tracts. They are now burning villages after villages. The charge of genocide for human rights, Amnesty International rights, unlawful killing and torture in the Chitong Hill Tracts, and militarization and oppression of the hill tribes. And then it leads to the military attack and the indigenous people fleeing to India and become refugee in those countries. So what you saw in the video at the beginning, it is a military attack, and that indigenous people were killed, more than 1,200 in that particular incident, and they flee and become refugee in other countries. So that was not enough. The government had a policy of demographic shift. What it is? It tells the rest of the Bengali people in the country that if you come to Chitong Hill Tracts, you will get a plain land 2.5 acre, plain and bumpy land mixed 4 acre, and hilly land 5 acres. And they'll get the ration and food and all kinds of support. That means that when indigenous people are driven out of their land, ancestral land, they become refugee in other countries. Their land is given to the Bengali people, bringing them from the other parts of the country. And it's a policy of demographic change. And here it shows that non-indigenous people in the Chitong Hill Tracts was only 2% in 1872, and in 1951 it is 9%. But after the militarization, the Bengali people became 41% in 1981, and then 49% in 1999, and they are now majority, over 55% in the Chitong Hill Tracts. So this is a government-sponsored demographic shift. Not only that, here is a picture where you can see that the Buddhist temples were burned down, and this person, indigenous person, trying to salvage the Char Buddha statues. And so their villages are burned. Here is a Buddhist monk who is trying to salvage the scripts, meaning that the scripts that are used in chanting for religious purpose. Also, government has a policy that any foreigner who wish to speak, meaning that travel to Chitong Hill Tracts, they need a high-level government permission. Otherwise, no foreigners can visit to the Chitong Hill Tracts. In 1997, there was a peace treaty. According to the peace treaty, the indigenous people militia group, they surrendered. But governments promised to demilitarize. That means that withdraw military from the Chitong Hill Tracts, allow refugees to return, and also stop government-sponsored mass migration, preserve language and culture. Although indigenous people surrender arms, but most of this agreement that governments needed to honor but did not honor are still in 2023 unfulfilled, even though agreement was signed in 1997. So this is the same way that sometimes we say justice delayed is justice denied. And even to this day, this is 2017 arson attack on the Jummo. Jummo is the name of the indigenous groups, villages by Bengali settlers, and 300 houses torched. So if you go to Chitong Hill Tracts today, and you will see the military still rules this part of the country. So now let me talk a little bit about narrative of citizenship. What does it mean for a citizen? So this is the consulate first secretary says Bangladesh doesn't have any indigenous population. That means that the constitution doesn't recognize that there are any indigenous people in the country. And not only that, government put restrictions on not using the word Adibashi. Adibashi in Bangla means indigenous, and so that they cannot use. The NGO, which are the non-governmental organization, they are also asked not to use the word indigenous or Adivashi. So that means that the entire existence of people has been denied. So if they are not indigenous, who are they? So in Bangladesh, these are the Bengali women. She is Jati, but indigenous people are known as Upojati. And the word Upo means inferior. So it's like inferior race. And also primitive or uncivilized. So this brings me to the first point. Is the British oppressed India and Pakistan. Pakistan then oppressed India and Bangladesh, East Pakistan. Sorry, Pakistan oppressed East Pakistan. And then when East Pakistan became Bangladesh, they oppressed the indigenous people. In all these three circumstances, it shows that oppressed become oppressor. So the question I have is that oppressed can and often become oppressor. Bangladesh is probably a classic case. Why do oppressed become oppressor? But most importantly, how can we break the vicious cycle? Can education play any role, and how? The second topic that I would like to talk about is about the language. So monolingual habitus. So in Bangladesh, on the 21st February, when they celebrate Mother Language Day, you can see that all the letters and alphabets are in Bangla. Here also. And so Mother Language Day celebration, but only celebrate Bangla. But this country has other languages. So that means that Mother Language Day, even though officially being celebrated, but in reality, it is celebrated as a Bangla language only day. And these are not the same thing. So what is the effect of this monolingual policy in the country? Because Bangla is the only official language in the country. Much of the indigenous languages are on the brink of extinction, and languages are also a window to our culture. Less than 50 elders alive today who can read and write in Moro language. And when I ask an indigenous elders what language means to her, she says language is not just a tool for communication. It's a voice through which our ancestors speak with us and through which our children make a meaning of the world around us. So this is the education policy. It's a single language policy, rigid centralized curriculum, but also books have no cultural relevance to indigenous communities. And that's why there is a high dropout. Maung Marma, 7-year-old, and she dropped out in the 2nd grade because she says in school we have to read in Bangla language. I struggle a lot to understand the Bangla text. Those who study language and literacy knows that children learn best if you start them in the languages they speak at home, and then you gradually introduce the second language. So that's why it is a huge dropout. When you have 100 children in the villages, only 8% left when it goes to 11th grade. So monolingual policy, but it's not just about the language. If in a way, in this context, both in British India and then Pakistan and then in Bangladesh, monolingual policy is a tip of the iceberg. So when you see monolingual policy, there is more underneath. And you can think of this, that say from Urdu, and 21st February 1952, which leads to mass killing here in 1971 during the Independence War. But then Bangla considered as a national language, militarization of the Chittagong Hill Tracts, and massacre of indigenous people. So what it shows that even though if you see monolingual policy, but you have the discrimination, racial and ethnic superiority, content, hatred, subjugation, assimilation, domination. Many of these are underneath. Officially, you can see it is just a monolingual policy. So epistemic monolingualism is a form of oppression. So that's why when you see monolingual policy, it's almost like a canary in a coal mine. And we educators should not be sleepwalkers. So I say monolingual mindset is a disease of the colonial mind. The world is not monolingual. It was not monolingual 200 years ago. It was not monolingual 500 years ago. And the world is not monolingual 5,000 years ago. But the national policies of monolingualism is a disease of the colonial mind. The good news is monolingual mindset is curable. Okay, so that brings me to the third and last point today. How do we create hope and sustain hope in bleak times, such as in the Chittagong Hill Tracks? So I, with the help of the community members, we created an oral story project, because oral stories has long been a tradition among the indigenous people of the Chittagong Hill Tracks. And so we work with the communities, we build a school, and I, because I lived in Massachusetts at Harvard, and I had a fortunate to meet Noam Chomsky, who is a famous linguist, as well as he is a political dissident. Noam Chomsky was at that time at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. I had the opportunity to meet him and get some advice from him. So this is a very typical scenario in the villages. The grandma tells stories to her grandchildren, but it is not just only her grandchildren. She tells a story to grandchildren's or children's of the entire village. It is not just her own grandchildren only. And some grandmas are very good in sharing their stories because they know how to use poetic verses and many ways to engage children. So here is an example. So she has been sharing the story for more than 2 hours. I just shared a small clip, and she can tell a long story, an epic, and she does it with breaks for 5-6 days. So she will tell 1 or 2 hours today, and then she will stop for the day, and then she will come on next day and next day. And so, and she doesn't need to read or anything. She can just remember all of this. So, and then I asked the children to share the story in the classroom. So they come to the classroom and stand in front of the class, share the story. So here you can see that they are sharing stories with impromptu delight of their classmates. So here is an example. So this is a 4th grade classroom. She told the story for 17 minutes. I cut it in short just to show that how popular these stories are among the students. So when they do tell their story, I video record them with our team. And then we publish storybooks based on indigenous stories collected by children. And they can see for the first time their villages, their grandmas are reflected in the textbook. They can see their communities in the textbook. And we also created a 6-language dictionary where you can see that there are 4 indigenous languages, then Bangla as well as English. And so it helps to create a multilingual habitus, multilingual mindset. So, and then they also start learning to write in their mother tongue. And this is happening for the first time in 70 plus years, because since the 1947, Pakistan imposed Urdu, Bangladesh imposed Bangla. So generation of indigenous people did not have opportunity to learn and write in their own mother tongue. And here is a little girl, she's writing her name. And here is a little boy who is writing the numbers. And again, this is happening for the first time in 70 plus years. And here is a boy.
Hey, bro. Hey, Rui. Dega kamar ide. Joget damarai, bro. Now, u join si marma ichago pho SSI piang pra ke me.
Again, these children are learning to write for the first time that even their parents or grandparents didn't have the opportunity to learn. So here is a little girl. She is teaching others who are barely 1 or 2 years younger than her about the indigenous alphabet she learned. And I call her, this is our future teacher. And then also we have created a mother tongue-based learning platforms. Not only that, then we took these storybooks and we designed curriculum. So we collected over 98 stories, published 16 children's storybooks, but also other storybooks that we did not officially publish, but made it available for students. And then, so this is a 3rd grade classroom. This may look like very normal classroom on the left. On the right, it is probably 6th or 7th grade. So you can see these girls are talking about a question based on the stories, meaning that the teacher allowing here, encouraging children to speak and consult with each other. Because in a normal classrooms in Bangladesh today, teacher come in front of the classroom and teacher speaks, and all students silent, 1 or 2 questions, and then students go home. But literature shows, research studies shows that when the children have an opportunity to discuss the content, it is improve their engagement as well as academic outcome. So here are 3rd graders exploring the content of the story, and some of them even acting, which is a role play. And these are probably 7th graders. They are presenting their group discussion. So I have looked at over 28 schools with several thousand students, 4,000 plus students, and saw that these activities improve the academic outcome of students. Not going into the details of all the graphs, we'll be happy to answer in Q&A, but it helps their close the achievement gap. And also it improves their writing. So we assess how well they write. It also improves student engagement with the content. And then the students, which is also being, I was pleasantly surprised that they were able to extract moral and ethical lessons from this storybook. This is not something that we see that indigenous oral stories as a resource for moral and ethical lessons in academia. However, this is a missed opportunity because over generations, for hundreds of years, this story is passed down to the children, and the children become storytellers, the next generation, because they contain lessons how to be a good human being in our society. So, and then these storybooks, you can see that they're published in Korean, in Brazilian Portuguese, so that Portuguese children can read. We had German translated. Bruno and others helped to translate in French so that French kids can learn from this. And we received some awards, Best Book Awards finalist. We received winner in the New England. And here it's a graduation. So at Harvard Graduate School of Education, when the students graduate, they wave a book. And this is where they are waving these books of children. You can see that this is the picture in the Harvard graduation ceremony. If I zoom in, you can see that, so all these three individuals, they are getting their doctorate and they are waving the children's book. When I showed this picture to our children in the village, they laughed and laughed. They couldn't figure out why a bunch of adults wearing strange robes are so excited about the books that they helped to create. So finally, a change. That means that we not only just did the research and studies, we advocacy to the government is that if you do this, it improves children's academic outcome. And then so finally, government changed the policy from the grade 1, from the kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Government agreed to have indigenous languages in the textbook. So these are the pictures of the textbook. Marma is my own ethnic group. Chakma is another ethnic group. So from kindergarten to grade 3, now children can have in their learning in their mother tongue. It did not change the national language policy. It allowed the language of instruction policy for the lower grades. And when I ask people, the parents, and they say, most of my students and the teachers are happy with the books being in their mother tongue and being able to use the languages they speak at home in their daily lives as well as in school. This makes me hopeful about the future. So help to create hope. Not only that, one of the indigenous story become a textbook for the whole country in the textbook. And I say this grandmother who shared the story, she never had the opportunity to go to school, but now schools goes through her. So I also work with the communities to build schools. So this is one of the schools, and these are in front of the ladies girls hostel where the girls can stay. And also these are picture with secondary and high school, meaning that from 5th grade to 10th grade students. And when I'm not busy doing my research or teaching, I go to schools and I have a storytelling session with students. So you can see that their curiosity and wonder. This is kindergarten, and their curiosity and wonder, and look in their faces makes everything worthwhile. Not only that, we created songs based on the languages, because we know from this research, playful learning is how the children learn, through play. So you get the idea, so that they can learn in their own. So the Chittagong Hill Tracks I come from, it is the most touristy spot in the country. It has high green mountains. Even you can walk above the clouds. Very beautiful sunrise and sunset. People are mesmerized by the beauty of the lake and the mountains, turquoise lake and blue-green mountain. But for me, the most beautiful thing of this place are the children. So I work with the communities so that we can remove the barriers, so that they can sing, they can dance, they can jump, they can shine, and they can light up our world. So with that, I end my presentation the way our children say, Kiju Timba. Thank you. And here is some additional information. So I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you. Muchas
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Maung. All right, we're going to pass to the questions section. We have one question. Isabel, can you do it orally, please? I know that you wrote it down on the chat, but can you do it orally? Isabel?
Hello, Dr. Consuelo, how are you?
Hello. Good,
Hello.
thank you so much.
Okay. Hello, Professor.
Yes.
I'm gonna try to turn my camera on. How are you? Very nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very interesting.
Very welcome.
Thank you. I was asking in the chat a question because I see some similarities between the linguistic policies in Bangladesh and Colombia in regards to how monolingualism is promoted. For example, here in Colombia, we have a national bilingual policy, but it is focused on English. And we have we actually have 65 indigenous languages. We have 2 Creoles, and we have the sign language. So when we see these linguistic policies that promote monolingualism and do not take into account our country, such as, you know, as well as yours, which has some similar characteristics to ours, I see that the multiculturalism and the pluriculturalism and multilingualism are disregarded. They are not taken into account because we are talking about a bilingual policy that promotes only one language. So it's not even bilingual, right? So the question I was asking you is, what would you say would be the ideal, and I put that into quotation marks, like ideal linguistic policies for the countries with this so specific characteristic? Thank you very much, Professor. I don't know if the question is clear.
Yeah, the question is clear. So, but the answer may not be clear. So let me say that the context of Bangladesh, Colombia may have similarities, but not the same, because Bangladesh policy is monolingual policy. There's just only one language. So, but in many countries, you have more than one official language. So, however, your point is also very good, is that monolingual policy in the context of Colombia, you are saying the Spanish as well as English, but it disregards the languages of other communities and groups. So there could be a policy that incorporate the children's opportunity to learn, because we think of from the scientific perspective, from the research evidence perspective, that there are probably more than 50 years of academic research. It shows that a child learns best when you start them in the languages they speak at home. Why? Because when you need to learn something, there is something called decoding and there is something called comprehension. So decoding is like, how do you spell it, right? So if a child, say, learn English, but learn to spell it, so learn, W-A-T-E-R, water. So the child can say water, but the child has no clue what the water means. But if you start them in their mother tongue, they don't need to worry about it. So in my language, water means re. So if they learn how to spell the re, they already know what re means. Re means the water. I drink it every day. My mom gives me water every day, right? So you take out the challenges of comprehension when you start them with the languages they speak at home. So you start with your first language from in the kindergarten, in the first grade, and then you gradually, 20%, 40% introduce your second language. But also the goal, what is the goal? If the goal is that so that they can learn the national language better, very good, then you can say, okay, we can have a transitional bilingual program, meaning that you gradually reduce the indigenous language and then have more and more official language. But this is not an ideal situation. The ideal situation is to be truly bilingual. And to be truly bilingual, you need to have both of those languages in academic settings. So there are many studies and there are many ways that we can make it truly bilingual. So that is from the language and literacy perspective. But if you think of from also another perspective, so let me share a slide so that you can see. So we know that language is not just a language. Language is related to the culture. In fact, language is a window to the culture. But not only that, language and culture collectively influence our identity, not just individual identity, our collective identity. But many linguists stop the research here, meaning the language, culture, and identity. What I say that this is not complete. The discussion with the language, culture, and identity is not complete if you do not include the power differential, the role of power. So that means that when you have deprived a group of children from learning in their mother tongue, this is not just about the language. It is about discrimination. It also gives an idea, both from the oppressed community, that we are being discriminated against. And we are not valued as equal in this country. And that creates more problem down the line. So to have academically, the children will drop out when they struggle. So one of the things I did in Bangladesh is that I told the Bangladesh government, if you do not have the opportunity for children to learn, look at this girl, she's in the 2nd grade and she dropped out. And guess what? If she drops out in the 2nd grade, she will not learn Bangla anyway. But if you create an opportunities for them to learn in the mother tongue and then learn Bangla, then she can reach 10th grade, 12th grade, or college, and then she can be more productive citizen of the country. So it is not only good for the indigenous people, it is good for the whole country. Thank you. That's a good question.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you so much, Isabel, to help us too. Well, I don't have more questions in the chat. However, I want to ask, if you don't mind, Doctor, the situation that you already shared with us about Chiratong Hill Tract is really similar to our country. How can we as educators and our students, not just the doctoral students, but also any kind of a student, help us to transform our society? How can we be less consumerism and more sensitive to other needs?
This is a very good question. So I think those who do the work, and I think that academics have a role to play, but also community. So depending on your position, you can come as an academic university professor, or you can be also a community member, or you can be a government official. But in all cases, if you come with the mindset is that diversity is an asset and equity, we have to think of all children, not just few children who are from, say, privileged community, but think of all children and what we can do best and what the research evidence show that what is good for learning. And then also I would encourage people to conduct more studies with the indigenous communities, indigenous children, and share the findings with the governments, share the findings with the community, create an awareness. But I would suggest few things though, because when you are working with the indigenous people, you cannot be going there, say, oh, I have a university PhD, I know everything, and then I'm going to tell you what to do. That is a trap. So I'm going to share with you, say, research with indigenous people. One of the things I say to people is that please do not be a fly-by researchers. I have seen this in many countries, including in the United States, that researchers go in and spend 2 weeks and 1 month, and they come and they write a paper. And they think that they know a lot about indigenous people. No, 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 no. This is wrong. It is that it is unethical because you do not know a community in 15 days or a month. So whatever you do, try to spend time to build the relationship, to know in depth what is going on in that community. And so do not be a fly-by researcher. So there are 5 R's, say. Think of it. Respect. When you go to a community, you think of respect. Relevance. Is it relevant for them? Not it is relevant for my doctoral research, but is it relevant for them? Meaning that what is the benefit to them? Not just I get a degree. Reciprocity. If they open their stories to you, you also can open your story. Who are you? Who is Consuelo? Yes, she is a professor, but why does she care here? What she wants to do here? So share your story, reciprocity, and then responsibility. Think of your responsibility as an academic, but also spend time in building the relationship. The second one I would say is that I don't know, probably it is true in Colombia too. So when I was doing my doctorate at Harvard, we have to do like IRB, Institution Review Board guideline. So we follow the guideline, and when we go to the community, we make sure that we follow the guideline of the university. But have you ever thought of community guideline? University have their own guideline, but community have their own guideline too. You may have to get the consent of the parents, assent of the children, but that is not enough. Community guidelines do not end with your research. That means that you finish your research, you don't have any more guideline. No, no, no. When you build a community relationship, it stays with you forever. The community thinks this is a long-term relationship. So seek to understand and respect the community guideline. The other one, I would say that when you think of something, learn something and do something, you come and tell, okay, this is what we know about indigenous people. But often we don't bring the indigenous communities or marginalized community, their voices. So for example, when I speak, if I have a chance, I will share the videos of the children, videos of the indigenous women. Why? Because I can say this, but my saying is not enough. We have to bring their authentic voices, because Dr. Cornel West, who is a professor that I had a chance to speak, and Cornel West, by the way, is a US presidential candidate in 2024. He said that condition of truth is to let the suffering speak. So lift and prioritize the voices of community that you are trying to work with in indigenous people. So I will think that these are the few points, but I would be happy to share more. That's a good question, Consuelo. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, doctor, we have the last question from Juliana Garcia. She wants to know how long does the research take and how many schools did you use?
So I can say about my own research, but you do not have to follow the guideline, because when you're in the university, you work with your advisor. So the Chittagong Hill Tracts is militarized, and it is difficult to do research in that area. So one of my advisory committee says, why don't you do research with the children in Boston, so that you don't have to take risk with your travel, and you have no risk of getting arrested or physical harm. I thought about it. I can study children in Boston and then write my doctoral dissertation. But guess what? If I don't do research with the children in Boston, there are probably 100 PhDs are studying the children in Boston. But if I don't do work with the Chittagong Hill Tracts where I come from, there are very, very few who can work with these children. So that's why I choose Chittagong Hill Tracts. But my advisor also told me is that if you collect the stories and publish a book, the publishing books take much longer. It will delay your PhD. And she was correct. She says you don't have to publish books. But I felt so connected with the community members that I published a book. And then also I did research in, as I said, with the 28 schools and over 4,500 children from grade 3 to grade 10. And each context is different. But in my context, I have the opportunity to do this. If you have a smaller set of children, smaller set of school, given the circumstances, that is fine. So, but the other part is that university requires you submit your doctorate, then you get a degree. For me, it never stopped. Why? Because my goal is not just to get a degree. That's why we work sharing the finding with the community members, sharing the results with the government, so that we can advocate and finally change government's language policy, language of instruction policy, so that finally they allow to have indigenous language-based education up to grade 3. So you can see, you can do research just for a degree, or you can do research because this is what you want to do for the rest of your life. With your passion and with your interest, you make your scholarly pursuit of this work that can not only benefit you, but it benefits generations of children and community members.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. The time is over. Thank you so much. I see you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So have a nice day. We'll keep in touch.
You are very welcome. And again, it's a true joy and honor for this opportunity. So I am really excited and looking forward to my work for the next 2-3 days. The next 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.